ever dreamt of a better version of yourself? What would you do to be loved? What would you do to be perfect? Try the substance. The Substance stars Demi Moore as Elizabeth Sparkles, a newly 50 and fired exercise TV show host whose star power has been fading for what we can assume is a couple decades now. After losing her job, Elizabeth discovers a tempting offer called The Substance, hence the title. Now, this movie probably wins the award for the film that came out of nowhere and became the talk of the town online. I remember hearing that Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley were doing a movie with the director of Revenge, but didn't see anything else about it until its social media marketing campaign. And to give credit where credit is due, The Substance has had one of the best marketing campaigns of the year. Now, I wasn't able to see it until a couple weeks after its initial release. Even with the murmurs within film circles online, this movie did surprise me. The Substance is written and directed by Coralie Fargeau, who had previously directed the thriller Revenge, a solid, literal revenge thriller that was shot with enough style that made me interested to see where Fargeau would go next. And good lord, does she dial it up for this movie. This is maximalistic filmmaking to a T. It's incredibly bold and in your face. There's nothing subtle about this movie, but that works incredibly well to its advantage. From the vibrant color grading to the variety of lenses and shooting styles used, along with very creative camera movement, a lot of scenes are shot at a high frame rate, which contributes to the frenetic energy of these scenes. There is a lot of eye candy and bells and whistles in this movie, but it is very entertaining to see. Fargeau does an incredible job directing. This could very easily be a movie that falls flat under a director with a less interesting interpretation of the story. The brashness and audacious nature of the story itself helps the mean-spirited nature of it and emboldens its underlying themes. There's a lot of influence here and homage paid to famous directors such as Cronenberg, Kubrick, and Hitchcock. A lot of the set design is very Kubrickian in the way that it's presented and shot. The dual performances from Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley is some of both actresses' best work. These roles require both actresses to give a lot, and they meet the mark. This might be my favorite performance from Moore. There is intentional irony in casting Moore as a has-been actor that people don't find beautiful anymore, and that irony is not something that I think will be lost on anyone. Moore was nearly 60 while filming this movie, and she's playing 50, and still looks better than most people probably ever will. Now, this is a really, really good movie to go into blind. If you don't want to know anything past the premise, then I'll suggest clicking away now, coming back after you've seen it, because it will be difficult for me to talk about this movie without giving some mild spoilers, mostly for the second act. The ending and the third act will go completely unspoiled. The Substance is a product sold by a mysterious company that will produce a clone from the original user. The clone is a younger, more beautiful, flawless version of yourself. The catch is, however, that only one version can be active at a time, so there must be a balance. 1 week as yourself, 1 week as the clone. No exceptions, bad consequences. You are one. Both people do have their own consciousness, so they won't know exactly what the other will be doing while they're inactive. If the balance is broken, one side or the other will start to fall apart, meaning the entire routine will eventually fail altogether. Elizabeth creates Sue, the clone played by Margaret Qualley, after losing her job due to her age. Sue pursues the same career as Elizabeth and finds almost immediate success because of her beauty and her sex appeal. While this is what Elizabeth wanted, the success feels empty because it's not actually her. When Sue is active, she can be famous and loved and admired. When Elizabeth is active, she stays inside for her time, avoiding the public eye. This plays into Elizabeth's insecurities and does end up amplifying them. This movie is very intentionally a takedown of impossible beauty standards and fame within Hollywood. It also dives into how those things can affect someone's mental health, how insecurity and body dysmorphia can be debilitating. This is ultimately a body horror movie, but it does take a bit of a different approach. Elizabeth is in control the entire time, but her mental health and the way she sees herself is ultimately what pushes the horror elements into motion. There is a lot of symbolism throughout the movie, and Fargeau's direction puts that symbolism at the forefront. Sometimes it can be a little too shoved in your face and obvious, and I do wish there was a little bit more focus on the character work. There is one specific scene that does pull back the maximalistic
reigns a bit that I think is the best scene in the movie. About halfway through the movie, Elizabeth decides to go on a date after feeling down about the overwhelmingly positive response to Sue. When she gets ready, she checks herself in the mirror and goes to leave. Previously, the billboard just outside Elizabeth's apartment was updated for Sue's new TV show, showing her body sprawled across the canvas. When Elizabeth is leaving, she once again sees this billboard and feels the need to change her look slightly because of her insecurity. She adjusts, goes to leave again, goes back, adjusts, and repeats this until she has a breakdown. I think this scene is where the writing and direction works very, very well together. I think this is a scene that a lot of people will relate to. I know I did myself, and it did get to me a bit emotionally. You empathize with Elizabeth in this feeling of not thinking you look good enough and that you're not good enough, and not being able to see people because of the way that you see yourself. It will make you freeze, unable to do anything. And there is a significant amount of irony with it being Demi Moore in the role. The character looks great. She looks incredible for this date, but the character themselves cannot see that. And that's a scene that I think ultimately makes the movie work. It also functions as a tipping off point for both characters. The movie also addresses in how some women are specifically treated when they get older in Hollywood, or in any version of Fame, or just in general. And this treatment is personified in Dennis Quaid's character Harvey, the producer that oversees Elizabeth's show and ultimately fires her. He's this disgusting, extremely slimy person that juxtaposes the power he has over someone else's beauty and public perception. One of the nastiest scenes in the movie takes place when Harvey and Elizabeth go out to lunch and Harvey is scarfing down plates full of shrimp. It focuses on his mouth, his teeth, and hands, and chewing while he's trying to talk, and it really hits home how much of an unkempt slimeball this character really is. He's also used in a way that really shows how men in power see women they have power over, that they just pretty much objectify them. Now, one of the things that really did surprise me about this movie is how funny it is. It balances the weirdness of the concept with the ridiculousness of the expectations put on Elizabeth and Sue. Its funny moments are in its most baffling, dramatically ironic moments. The audience knows something is about to happen or is happening, and the supporting characters who are interacting with Elizabeth and Sue are so clueless that you almost can't believe it. The movie is fairly mean-spirited when it comes to how body image can destroy your sense of self, but it also has a sense of humor about it, especially with how some scenes are shot. One scene in particular having an absolutely ridiculous shot that did make me laugh. Another big talking point about this movie is the amount of nudity in it. Both Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley are naked in a handful of scenes throughout. I've seen a lot of pushback against this considering the movie's themes, but I personally didn't see it as a negative in the movie. The only time either actress is naked on screen is when the characters are switching places and are alone. It's not presented in this hypersexualized way, but more of an emotional vulnerability for the characters, that this is who they are and is ultimately the most horrific part of themselves in their opinion. You have to sacrifice yourself to be this other person that people like more, but you can't lose yourself in that. Because once you no longer recognize who you actually are and change yourself to fit everyone else's desires, you become this gross amalgamation of everything you tried to do that is not working. So while Sue herself is hypersexualized in public situations where that's how she wants to be seen, she isn't in those intimate moments. And I can understand why people wouldn't agree with that take or the choices that were made for this movie and the nudity in it. But I do think this movie does it in a much more intentional and respectful way than something like Blonde from a couple of years ago did. Now, I did mention the acting before. Like I said, I do think this is probably Demi Moore's best performance. I think Margaret Qualley is also really, really good in this role. And while this might not be the point, and I'm sure that the question has come up to some extent, it does make me wonder if the movie itself does kind of fall apart with having Margaret Qualley playing a perfect version of another character, where she does have to look like this flawless person, and if that would pressure an actress to feel like they have to look perfect in some way. I'm sure it's not nearly to the extent that this movie is taking that for body image and those issues, but I can see how that would also contribute to some insecurity if you are trying to play this role. I do think the writing does leave a little to be desired. The allegories and symbolism are obvious and they work, but some of the character work could have been just a little bit more fleshed out in my opinion. It did feel like something was missing. A lot of the dialogue was very on the nose and could have used some tweaking to be a little bit more compelling. This is a bit of a longer movie. It comes in at just over 2 hours and 20 minutes, and at times you can feel that runtime. I feel like it almost would have worked better as a very small limited series, like a 3-episode, 1-hour episode miniseries. But I do think that the movie format itself does work overall. The horror element does rely on the story and body horror more so than actual scares. I think that's why you'll see this compared to Cronenberg's movies more than anything. The makeup is also very well done. The whole third act really goes for it and goes over the top in the most horrifyingly funny way it can. I do see why people love this movie as much as they do, but I can also understand its detractors. It is very easily one of the most memorable movies and theater experiences I've had this year. It's batshit crazy in all the right ways, and if that's what you're looking for, you're probably going to like it. This movie has stuck with me since I saw it, and while it is an unexpected surprise, I do think the writing could have used a little bit more work. So as of right now, I will be rating The Substance a very strong B+. Now, have any of you seen the movie? I want to know if any of you agree with my takes on it, if you think I'm right or wrong. Let me know, and I will be back with another video.